is a set or series of movements with unity that's performed as one big piece. So this definition, I was not satisfied with it. It was really vague and just, no bueno. So I set out to define, see if there was something that connected these pieces, if there was something analytical or otherwise that really said, this is a suite. So I picked 3 different flute pieces that had the title of suite, and I analyzed them, just chordal analysis, and I didn't find anything that connected them. So when I was doing my research, I found out that one of the suites was written with the idea of J.S. Bach. So I was like, well, that's great. I have a J.S. Bach piece and I have this piece, so cool. I'll just narrow it down and see where I get from there. So with this newfound information, I decided to compare the suite in B minor, which was composed around 1723 to 1730. It was scored for flute and string quartet and has 7 movements. It was written by J.S. Bach. The second piece is the Suite Antique. It was composed in 1979, and John Rutter composed it with the ideals of Bach in the Baroque era, according to his program notes. And it was scored for flute, harpsichord, and string quartet, and it has 6 movements. So I decided to establish a certain set of parameters when I was analyzing each movement to look for similarities and differences. So the first parameter is tonality. I looked at the chord structure. I looked at the chord progressions. I looked at form, tempo, and time signature. And the other is just, does this piece follow the Baroque style? How does it fit into this era? So my purpose was, by analyzing and comparing these movements with the established parameters, I wanted to see how much influence Bach and the Baroque style had on John Rutter's composition of the Suite Antique. And I wanted to see if there really are connections, or if Rutter was using the power of suggestion to encourage his listener to hear, oh yeah, that sounds like it's Baroque. So the first 2 set of comparisons I'm doing is the first movement from each. So the first one is the overture from Bach's Suite in B minor. The first movement is an overture. It's written in the French style, or French overture. It has 2 main parts, a stately slow section with a dotted rhythm and duple meter, and a faster fugal section. The form is a rounded binary, so it's A, and then it goes into the faster section. And then a slower section returns, but it's not exactly what was stated previously. So there's 2 main ideas to listen for. The first one is in the slower section, and it's the slower section has a lot of dotted rhythms to listen to, and it really gives the feeling of a dance. And then the B section completely flips it around and does something completely different. So listen for those differences as I play Bach's overture from the Suite in B minor. So, as I said before, the A section begins with the dotted rhythms. It begins with one chord, which is the red, and it is followed by the 5 chord in the green. And you can see the first slower movement is entirely red and green for the most part. There's a very strong tonic to dominant relationship in a lot of what Bach is doing in this first section. The first section is slower, as I said before, and it has a full meter as the form dictates. The second section, however, just completely flips it around. And at first, Bach keeps you in a very comfortable position. He's like, okay, well, we're gonna stay with the 5 and 1 relationship, and we're gonna do that for a while. And then on the second page, he's like, let's explore E for a while, which is a close related key of B minor. Okay, cool. And then a little while later, let's go to D major. So he's just the chords and the analysis was real traditional, and then Bach was like, okay, I think we need to experiment, and we're going to really go through all of these closely related keys to make this sound interesting. Which he does that. He teases you a little bit. He brings back the 1 for a little bit, brings back the 5. You're like, oh, he's finally going back. But then he goes back and goes to E minor, explores some other keys, and then finally at the very end of the B section, he brings you back to the 5 and 1, the tonic to dominant. He's like, okay, we're finally getting home. And then the slow section returns. And again, it's the 1 to 5 relationship. The point of an overture is to establish the tonality for the rest of the movement. So this establishes B minor in the beginning. He experiments, but ultimately he brings you back home to B minor. This is very similar to what Rutter did in his prelude. The purpose of a prelude is to define the motor tonality of the rest of the work. But it's not really related to the rest of the piece. It's not. The purpose was to be improvisational, and there's no defined form given that it was improvisational. So the prelude is going to introduce a theme to you. This is in the A section, and Rutter just uses this all throughout. He brings it back at the end, he uses it in the B section, he really ties it together, and it's not as improvisational as it was in the Baroque, but it still is a cohesive work. So, Rutter's prelude. so it was ABA. So we see in the blue is the A section, the B is in yellow, and then it returns to the A section in blue. The A section is restated exactly as it first appeared in the beginning of the piece, after the B section, and even though the overture wasn't in a true ternary form, the slow, fast, slow of it gave it the feeling of an ABA. There was a single tempo and time signature through this entire movement. It was in 4/4, and it was a moderate quarter note equals 104. The movement starts in A minor. Again, the tonic is in red, and you can see the A section is very traditional, tonic to dominant again. The B section, much like Bach's B section, explores a different key. In this case, it's a mode, which Bach did not do. But the returning A section is pretty much note for note, so it's the tonic to dominant again. Just because Rutter used a mode and not a closely related key, as Bach did, doesn't mean that there's much difference between the two movements. It's still, the analysis still is very pleasant to listen to because there's the resolution of the 5/4. In Rutter's first movement, you can see a lot of Bach's influence, especially in the chord progressions. Nothing Rutter wrote was inappropriate to include in a Baroque prelude. So the next comparison will be of Bach's Sarabande, which is the third movement, and Rutter's Chanson, which is the fifth movement. I chose these two because upon first glance, they were both in triple meter and they were both slower. I thought, well, this should be pretty good. So let's start with the Sarabande. A Sarabande is a Baroque dance in triple meter. In France and Germany, they are usually slower, majestic dances, characterized by accented dotted rhythms. The melody is generally simple and it leaves room for ornamentation. The dance is usually written in binary form, thus has two parts, A and B. The main theme for this movement also includes a lot of instances of the dotted rhythm. So you're going to want to listen. Again, it's that dance style that they really were digging in the Baroque era. So, Bach's Sarabande. As previously stated, the form is A-B. So there's a first section and then a second section. It's in triple meter, and the quarter note equals about 70, 69, somewhere around there. Like previous movements, the analysis is fairly traditional. There's lots of red and green, as you can see. The A section and B section essentially switch. So the A section begins in the tonic and harps tonic and dominant. The B section starts in the dominant and then returns later to the tonic. This seems to be really a textbook definition of what a sarabande composed in France or Germany in the Baroque era would have sounded like. The rhythms in particular stand out as being very stylistic, and they provide the movement with forward motion. So, the next movement is Rutter chanson, and chanson is French for song. It's drastically different from Bach's sarabande. It's a piece of music that was popular in the Baroque, or in the medieval era, excuse me. The chanson has connections with folk music, so it's very singable. I'm not going to leave here singing the sarabande. However, the chanson has a nice catchy tune, and you're like, ooh, this isn't too bad. The form of this movement is ABA ternary again. However, this isn't an indication for the form of all chanson. The main theme to listen for comes in right at the beginning. And Rutter uses this theme by just bumping it up a third every time it comes in. So you're going to want to listen for that. It is also changed in the B section, and then the A section returns an octave lower. So, Rutter's chanson. First of all, it's not a dance. There's nothing about it that compels me to want to dance to it. It does have flow and motion, but it doesn't have the dotted rhythms that really propels it forward. The forms are also different, as well as the chord structure. The saraband and a lot of the red and green, tonic to dominant. This does not. This has every chord imaginable. It's very contemporary in terms of how Rutter was using the chords available to him. A lot of the chords are either borrowed from a different key, or they're chords that they wouldn't really use in the Baroque era a lot. So that was another huge difference. However, even though there were differences, they both seem to be written using the same inspiration. Bach looked to the French for a lot of his inspiration. He wrote the saraband and he wrote the French overture. Rutter also I feel like he took from that. Chanson's clearly French. Prelude is also a French idea. So even though they don't imitate, this clearly does not imitate the Baroque style at all. But the bigger picture indicates that Rutter was mirroring the ideals of Bach, even though it's only kind of. So the final section is a nice set of rondos. And rondo is a form. You have a recurring theme. So A, it's usually in the tonic key. And then you have secondary material, which is in a closely related key, something that's not tonic. And it goes A, and then we explore B a little, and then we go back to A, and then we explore C, and then we go back to A again, and so on. It just goes on. Rondo, as indicated by the spelling, is also French in origin. And the rondos usually begin and end with the A material to really drive home that tonic, 5-1. So the first rondo I'm playing is from Bach's Suite, and the theme that you will hear is this. As it's at the beginning of every recurring A section. So listen for that as I play Bach's rondo. So visually, this is what the form of a rondo looks like. The A section is in blue, zoom the A section, and then it goes into a completely different section, which is in yellow, and then it goes back, and then he explores another section, which is in yellow again, and then he goes back to the A section. So rondo movements don't necessarily indicate tempo and meter in the Baroque era, but the tempo for this is marked allegro. It's important to remember that tempo markings in the Baroque era weren't written in by the composer in most cases. They were either added by arrangers or editors much, much later. Additionally, tempo markings were much more conservative, so that says allegro. We think allegro, quarter note equals 120. Baroque people were like, quarter note equals 90 to 120. There was a lot more leeway and give to their tempos. The tonality to Bach's rondo is in keeping with every other movement in his suite. The A section is all 1s and 5 chords. And then he explores different keys in the B sections. So he explores E minor, he explores D major, but he always returns to the A section to really give you that good finality of the tonic to dominant. All in all, nothing stands out about this movement. It provides a good foundation for comparison to Rutter's rondo. Rutter didn't really deviate from his already established form. He also repeats the A section of serial twice at the beginning, once in the flute, and then again in the piano accompaniment. And then he finishes the piece with the A theme. The theme that you will hear at the beginning of each A section is as follows. And that you'll just hear coming back over and over again. So, enjoy Rutter's rondo. rondo movement has evolved, and it's taken on a particular role in large musical works. It essentially changed from a dance to the finale of a composition. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, but it's always with the intention to make a statement. Rutter's rondo appears to be the latter. The tempo marking is vivace, and every other movement in the Suite Antique has a very specific tempo marking, except for this one. The term vivace means that the performer should play the movement as quickly as they are possible, and this is really in direct conflict with the Baroque era conservative tempos. The chordal analysis, however, is very similar to Bach's rondo. This is the A section. It's pretty much all in tonic, except for a few dominant chords thrown in there to spice things up a little bit. But you can really see that Rutter kind of goes all out in his secondary sections. He explores closely related keys, he explores modes, he really wants to experiment with a lot of different things, much like his prelude did, and his chanson did as well. Within this last comparison, I believe that Rutter really incorporates his own modern style with elements from the Baroque era. And even though there were differences, Rutter writes using the correct form, sectionally and tonally. And considering the movements were composed 200 years apart, Rutter would be pretty hard-pressed not to incorporate his contemporary ideals into his music, Baroque ideals or not. So in conclusion, when I first started out with this project, I set out to find a unifying element to the pieces labeled Suite. And even though this proved to be unsuccessful, it led me to the comparison of Bach's Suite in B minor and John Rutter's Suite Antique. I set out to see how well Rutter composed his suite using the ideals of Bach, all while maintaining his own style as a composer. I feel that Rutter was somewhat successful in his task. The consistent use of the tonic to dominant relationship, the closely related keys, and the use of the French style connect these two suites. Additionally, the function of the first movements and the rondo movements provide a clear connection of the intention on Rutter's part. The overture and the prelude both serve as an introduction, as well as establish the tonality of a larger work, and the rondo movements are both constructed similarly, using the A material in the same locations of the movements. There are elements that are different, though. The Suite in B minor was a dance suite. This is made evidenced by the forms and by the dotted rhythms. Rutter's Suite, while pleasant to listen to, is not a dance. None of those movements are dance movements at all. The project, this is a work in progress. There are 4 of the movements in Bach's Suite, and there's 3 other movements in Rutter's Suite that could be analyzed and compared. Additionally, when I was working on the project, the original parameters that I established started to change, and I started to add in other things that it was like, well, I should look at this as well. So I hope to expand this project further in the future. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful night.